Stephen is a member of the Ballynalacken community group and wants to discuss a meeting tonight in Ballyuskill Town Hall. Stephen, good morning.
Hi Brian, thanks for having me on.
Great to have you with us. Ballynalacken, that community group, set up, I suppose, primarily to deal with wind farms being built in the area. Tell us what's planned for this evening.
Yeah, so I suppose this evening is a culmination of kind of several years' work, if you will. What the purpose of this evening is to inform people from the area and from across Kilkenny as to the major development that's being proposed in the area. We want to educate people from the area and we want to ask them for their assistance. We have a very tight timeline to which we have to adhere to. The application was submitted on the 13th of March and we have until the 9th of May to construct our observations on this and submit them to On Board Ballynalacken. I suppose it's the culmination of a very long preparation period. We became aware of this in 2023, to be honest. But by that stage, because of the way the planning application system works, by that stage, the ship had kind of sailed to a large degree because a pre-planning application had already been submitted to On Board Ballynalacken. So we immediately found ourselves on the back foot. And since then, until now, we've been furiously trying to educate ourselves. Obviously, we're not energy experts, nor planning experts, nor anything like that. So we've been trying to furiously educate ourselves to get us into a point where we can verbalise our concerns against this proposal. The proposal itself is for 12 wind turbines of 155 metres high. So for context, that's more than twice the spire in Dublin, and nearly 117 metres wide as regards the tip-to-tip of a rotor blade, the span. So it's an incredibly large development that's been proposed. And all the while with no or very, very little consultation with us, the members of the community. Unfortunately, it's already had an impact on us, the people that live in the area. So, for example, there's 47 households within a kilometre of these proposed turbines, and there's nearly 150 odd households in radius of about 2 kilometres of it. And yet again, very little consultation. So this is our opportunity now to have our input into this process, albeit at a very late stage. And we feel it's very important then that we have the support of the community and those that are concerned about developments such as these. So our meeting has been held in Ballyuskill Hall this evening at 7 p.m. and we'd encourage everybody and anybody to attend, hear what we have to say, and hopefully assist us in our objection to this proposal.
There's obviously procedures and organised structures in place whenever there's a planning application for anything. This opportunity is there, but as you said, it's not going to be there forever. People have until the 9th of May to make submissions or objections. What will happen at the meeting this evening?
So we've already had a number of community meetings. They've been, I suppose, held in an attempt to educate people as to what we knew at that stage. Of course, as I say, the application itself was only submitted on the 13th of March. That consists of several thousand pages of information of very technical type language. So again, I and my colleagues have tried to digest that and understand it because, as I say, it is quite technical language. So we have done that now, and what we aim to do is to present our interpretation of the application documents to people from the area and that have a concern in this area, and to encourage them to submit their observations to On Board Ballynalacken. So as I mentioned, there's a very strict timeline during which we can do this. So I suppose the pressure is on, and albeit say the power company itself would have had, they have resources, they have money, they have finance to put into this, and they have a history in this area. So as an example, in 2005, an application for half the number of turbines and half the height of the ones that are being proposed at this time was rejected by both Kilkenny County Council and On Board Ballynalacken. And yet, nearly 15 years later, an application is back in again for twice the number of turbines and double the height. And in actual fact, we because we've had to educate ourselves on this. There's a neighbouring proposed development as well for further turbines, although it's a separate application.
Absolutely.
And that's nearly 23 turbines in total. So it's a real industrialisation of our area, one that we didn't invite into our area, and worst of all, one that we haven't been consulted on. So it's a very unusual and very unpleasant situation for us, members of the community, and it's already driven, upset in the area.
The original application that was rejected back in 2005, as you said, for a smaller proposal, 20 years ago, things have changed substantially in terms of, energy awareness and, probably also fears around energy sources given the Ukrainian war and what's going on still in that particular region of the world. That proposal was rejected. On what basis was that one rejected?
So, in actual fact, that proposal was rejected on grounds of visual amenity, which means basically that it's a quite picturesque and a beautiful area. If anybody knows it, it's on top of the kind of KCLR plateau. You have views of 9 different counties. It's a phenomenal area it's a phenomenal asset to our community, but also to Kilkenny. So much so that a previous county development plan had it disallowed such developments in the area. It's only a more recent one, and a change in regulations through which this has come in. So the grounds of which the original application was rejected was on visual amenity and the beauty of the area. And yes, now it's appropriate to put twice the amount and double the height into the area. So we feel that we've great grounds for objection here, because nothing really has changed. And you're right to highlight the energy concerns of the country. Of course, renewable energy is the future. That's a fact. But it would be nice to be consulted on such things. There is a place for a renewable area, and likely there's a place for renewable energy in our area. However, it must be appropriate to the area, and again, consultation must take place. And I would encourage anybody that has a query on the energy consumption within Ireland, if you go onto the EirGrid website, it will give you information as to how energy is consumed in Ireland. So, as regards to household usage of energy, it's been fairly static over the last couple of years. So, due to the good work done and the good initiatives by government and local authorities and people, we've become a lot more energy efficient. So, in actual fact, although new houses come online, our energy usage has been fairly static. What's driving the demand now is big industry, and specifically data centres. And that's not my opinion. That's published on the EirGrid website. So I would encourage anybody to go on to that website and have a quick look. Because that's quite...
The rejection of the previous application, as you said, based on visual amenity, if you like, that's sort of an opinion-based decision. It's not based on fact. People have obviously different perceptions as to whether or not those wind turbines do affect the visual amenity. Are you concerned that something that's not necessarily based on data is the decision-making thing that could be the difference between an application like this succeeding or failing?
Yeah, I suppose with all due respect, Brian, I'd challenge that comment, because that founding was by Kilkenny County Council, and they would have commissioned various and substantial reports at the time. So it's not opinion, it is actually the formal stance of the Kilkenny County Council at that time. So that would have encompassed a whole range of studies such as hydrology, ecology, wildlife, and the impact on people and wildlife in the area. And if I could maybe just allude quite quickly to some of the elements of the newest application. So, for example, the people of KCLR might not be aware, but during the construction phase of this, there's going to be more than 5,000 vehicle movements through the town of KCLR. They're going to lower ESB lines, they're going to make alterations to roadways and removal of some town features to allow these massive truckloads through the area. And in actual fact, because a wind turbine is obviously a substantial structure, there's a large amount of concrete that's required in the foundation of each. So during the continuous pour of one of these foundations for a wind turbine, there's going to be a concrete lorry passing through KCLR every 4.5 minutes over a 12.5-hour period. So, I mean, my children go to school in the area. They're young enough to not go to the community school yet in Castlecomer. But if my children were there, I'd be quite worried about that prospect. And that's just the turbines themselves.
Yeah, I know, totally. But I mean, the other thing that we're talking about is, you and I are not talking about it, the general discourse around housing, for example. And a lot of people have said that it's the infrastructure that we need to develop first, because Castlecomer, as I'm sure will be very aware, for example, the water infrastructure around there is certainly not of a standard to take further development. Now, I know we're not talking about water this morning, but do we need, as a nation, to consider these infrastructure projects in order to be able to deal with things like, for example, the housing crisis?
Yeah, we certainly do, but we need a fuller conversation, and we need a national conversation about that. There's no, as I say, as you alluded to, and again, please, for your listeners, do go onto the appropriate website, Airgrid website, and look at that. It's not my opinion. That is fact. The energy usage in Ireland per household has been fairly static. This energy requirement and the planned energy requirement for future years is driven by a very specific segment, which is data centres.
But it's also largely driven, though, by us wanting to become more energy efficient and more energy self-sustainable, though, isn't it?
But we are, Brian. Hence why our household usage has remained static. Of all the tens of thousands of houses that come online and came online over the previous decade, our household usage has stayed fairly static. But you're right, there are other issues such as water infrastructure. Bigger and fuller conversations have to be had about that, because there is an impact of this proposed development in our area. There are impacts on the hydrology within the area and drainage features within the area. So these conversations have to be had, most definitely, but they have to be had at every level, national, local, and at the county level as well. So this is a whole jigsaw that must come together to get to the right solution. And that solution is that we all, have happy and content lives in our houses with the appropriate functions that we require, i.e. water, electricity, and internet, for example. That's all possible, but it must be planned, and it must recognise the regions within which they've been placed. I mean, Brian, you mentioned yourself over the course of the weekend you're out cutting the lawn and enjoying the weather. I mean, that's excellent. So was I. And I want to continue doing that. But my house is less than a kilometre away from one of these wind turbines. And I have three young children, one of whom is autistic, so she has a particular set of challenges. But in actual fact, any child and any adult and any elderly person to whom sleep is important, let's say, so that's the basis of all good health. If you have a good night's sleep, that's key. I fear that I won't be able to enjoy my weekends or any day at my house, because I will have shadow flicker, which is the alternating light and dark that comes off one of these. I'll have background noise, obviously the movement of the blades themselves, and there's other phenomena that need to be investigated, such as infrasound. These all may have effects on us, everybody in the locality, and anybody else. And I also should allude to the fact that there's been a couple of cases through the courts recently, which these elements were recognised as having an impact on people's lives. I don't want to be that person. I don't want my family to be impacted by this.
Yeah, the other thing that came to my mind, Stephen, was when you were talking about the size of the document that was submitted as part of this planning application. A massive document, put together by the energy company who have obviously big resources. That must be a massive challenge for organisations like yourselves, Ballynalacken Community Group, to deal with that. Do you think on a national level it's maybe time for, the department to understand the challenges faced by community groups, simply to even understand those documents? I mean, do you think there should be some way of groups like yours getting help from the government, or indeed maybe even expanding the timelines around this to allow you time to process these documents properly?
Yes, that would be helpful, but really what would be most helpful, I believe, would be a proper structure through which these companies can submit their applications and pre-applications. I mean, I'm one of a number of people on this group, and by the way, the Ballynalacken Community Group, it's a somewhat It wouldn't be a very well-known townsland, but again, that's applied by the power companies. It's not called the Castlecomer Wind Turbine Development because there are several thousand people in Castlecomer that would immediately be aware of it. But to answer your question, Brian, yes, more information is needed, more education is needed, and more accountability of the power companies involved. I mean, we had an application in 2005 that was rejected. Over a decade later, they're back again with more, higher, taller, and more of them. When does it stop? When does that stop? If, and I hope we are successful in our objection to this development, will it be another 2 years and an application will go in for twice the number again, but under maybe a different townsland name, for example? When does this stop? We are a community. We live in the area. I want to raise my children to go to school in this area and hopefully have employment and bring money into the area, be part of the local economy, be of benefit to. I live in the area. I spend my money in the area. I send my children to schools in the area, schools which are struggling for student numbers to maintain their teacher-student ratio, etc. I'm part of that community. I want to stay part of that community. I don't want to be driven out by the industrialization of my area, and have never, not once, have I been consulted properly on this. And by the by, on the lists of households within the area, my household is nominated at the top of the list. So
you mentioned proper structures.
Wouldn't you think it'd be appropriate for me to be consulted on, perhaps?
You mentioned proper structures in relation to applications like this being submitted. On Board Planala is the body to which the application is submitted. They rejected that previous proposal back in 2005. So, I would suggest to you that maybe On Board Planala so far are the correct body. Do you think the work of On Board Planala so far gives you hope in relation to this particular application?
It does, because the process within On Board Planala is giving us the opportunity to have our input into the planning process. So that is correct and that is good. And sorry, just by means of correction, the previous application in 2005 was rejected by Kilkenny County Council, in fact, because of the size of it. And then it was appealed onto.
And do you have a fear, Stephen, that this particular application, because it's not going to our local county council, because it now goes directly to On Board Planala, and the slightly reduced local awareness perhaps within Board Planala compared to the county council, are you concerned by that?
I am to a degree, but in actual fact, at our meeting tonight in Ballyuskal Town Hall at 7 p.m, we have the vast majority of Kilkenny County councillors are going to be present, and we have had several meetings with them through which they have given their commitment as county councillors and also as part of the council that they will be opposed to this. And that is logical because it's carrying on from the stance of the previous application. So that gives me confidence that we are approaching this in the right way, and we have the correct stakeholders present to assist us to do this. But there is a mechanism with On Board Planala. That is the mechanism. We will operate within that, of course. Now, the timelines are, I would consider them a little tight. Again, the technicality of the document has to be digested, consumed, and then a logical argument put against it. But, however, that is the process. We will operate within that process, of course. So there is an opportunity there for us. But again, it's the prelude to this. It's the years and, more than a decade of preparation that other stakeholders have had, that you are at quite a significant backstep here when you come to prepare for this.
Yeah. And just finally then, Stephen, if not Ballynalacken, then where?
Well, sure, there's already a pre-application for one in neighbouring townsland, such as Froda, Crut, Scana. So they're there. And again, we have had contact with other community groups across Kilkenny. We're not the only ones in this situation. There are multiple communities across the county in this situation, and only because we're in this situation, we have become aware of each other, and we now realise the plan, if you will. Like, look at the websites that that have this information. The entirety of Kilkenny, in some shape or form, there's proposals of some form or shape across the majority of Kilkenny, and it's unbelievable when you look at it, and it's unbelievable to be in the middle of this, if you know what I mean, to have to make this fight for your local community, but that's where we find ourselves.
Okay. Well, Stephen Walsh, a member, only one member, as he said rightly, of that Ballynalacken community group, that meeting taking place in Ballyuskill Town Hall at 7 p.m. this evening. Stephen, thanks for your time this morning.
Thanks, Brian. If I could also just highlight and direct people towards our Facebook page, which is No to Ballynalacken Wind Farm, and also we have a GoFundMe page as well, because obviously endeavours such as this cost money, so we are looking for support from across the community, and do log into the Facebook page for information and updates.
Stephen, thank you very much for joining us this morning on the KCLR Daily, and we'll keep you up to date with things that follow on from that meeting in Ballyuskill Town Hall at 7 o'clock this evening. After a short break, we're going to look back at what happened over the week, even as a member of the Ballynalacken community group.